Stanley Cup predictions. Am I good at them? Absolutely not. Am I going to try? Yes, absolutely. Is it going to be good? No. No, it's not. This is the first time I'm ever doing this, and it's admittedly a bit interesting. I went a different direction than most people do. Most people look at the statistics, which makes sense. That's the thing that makes sense. That's what people should do, because it's right there for the taking. I did something stupid. I did something dumb, and I went after the storyline. Because as far as I'm concerned, skill doesn't matter. It does matter. It do matter to be skilled in hockey to make the playoffs. But the mentality is what I think is more important here. So, that being said, round 1, Vegas versus Dallas. Dallas takes it in 6. I have decided, because the way I see it, Dallas lost to Vegas last year. And the way that Dallas lost to Vegas last year was in, I believe, the conference final. I almost said the Conference Cup final, which is kind of true, but it's not what I meant. Anyway, conference finals, Dallas gets eliminated, Vegas goes on, they go all the way. I think Dallas is going to want to play the revenge game. So I think Dallas is going to go and try and decimate the Golden Knights. However, I think the Golden Knights, being that they're the Stanley Cup champions from last year, they're going to try and hold their own. And Mark Stone, the Stone, is coming back. But I don't think his time off helped them any. I know he might be rested, but I think his lack of play in the last couple days, couple weeks, has, you get rusty. Next series, Winnipeg, Colorado. If you saw the last game that they played against each other, it was not great. Winnipeg goes and beats Colorado 7-0. I don't know what's been going on with Colorado, but because of that game and, quite frankly, the drive that Winnipeg has to have right now because of their playoff history from years past, Winnipeg's going to probably, hopefully, be hungrier. Winnipeg in 7. Vancouver versus Nashville. Now, this one was kind of interesting to me because Vancouver, last season, they kind of sucked. A little bit. This season, they don't suck. They're in the playoffs. But I think they're underexperienced. I think they need to build up the experience to be able to go further in the playoffs. I don't think they're going to beat Nashville. But I do think, having said that, I do think that this will give them that experience that they can take it like next year, for example, and they can go and cream everyone else. Do I think they'll make the playoffs next year? Yes. Do I think they'll make it to the Stanley Cup final next year? No. But that's not the topic for today. Predators in 6. Edmonton versus LA. A bit of a controversial one. I have LA winning it. And the reason for that is for the past 2 years, Edmonton has gone and creamed the LA Kings. So now the LA Kings, seeing that they have been creamed by this team for the last 2 years, is going to go out basically guns blazing, basically trying to whack everyone else. There might be some illegal stuff that turns legal because it's the playoffs. So it'll be interesting to see how that all turns out. But I think this is the year that the Kings go and oust the Oilers. The revenge game is probably going to be the biggest focal point for the Kings, I think. So I have Kings in 6. Next one, Florida, Tampa Bay. Battle of Florida. This is one of the series that I'm going to be covering as the timeline goes on because I really want to. This is going to be a very brutal, very dirty. I will say it's gonna be dirty. It's going to be messy. It's going to be violent. It's a series I cannot wait to watch. That said, Florida in 7. The reason for that is because I think Florida has a bit more to fight for. Yeah, everyone's fighting for the Stanley Cup, but no one's ever fighting for it for the same reasons. Florida, they hit the Stanley Cup finals last year against Vegas. They got ousted in 5 games. Florida has a bigger shoe to fill from last season. They have a bigger reason to have a bigger drive. So I think that's going to translate into this series. Boston versus Toronto. Boston in 7. Next question. Okay, no, I'm just kidding. I should rationalize why I say this. The reason I say that Boston is going to beat Toronto in 7 games is not just for the lulz. It's not just for the memes. But the reason that I say this is because of what happened last season against Florida. Boston has to prove that that was a fluke. Boston has to prove to the league and make a statement that last year was just a fluke. It was just something that, they kind of choked. They choked a bit. That's kind of a given. So they need to go and make amends. Unfortunately, that team that they have to make amends against is the Leafs. So the memes will live on. The other thing, I know that the Toronto Maple Leafs aspect, their focal point for this year under Treliving was that they were going to get more grit and they were going to get more physical. And they did that. They got Reeves. They got Bertuzzi. They got Domi. They've got the grit. They don't have the pest. And the pest, I think, beats the grit. The grit wants to beat you up. The pest is going to make you do that so that you forget how to play hockey. New York Rangers versus Washington Capitals. Sweep Rangers. Reason for that? Washington is coming in. They're basically sneaking in. I think they're a little bit surprised at the outcome. They're glad, but I think they're surprised by the outcome, and they might be taken by surprise in their surprise. The Rangers, after last season losing to the Devils, they've got something of their own that they're going to prove. Washington's not trying to prove anything. They're just glad to be here, as far as I'm concerned. Rangers taking them up. Carolina versus Islanders. Carolina in 6, because I feel that New York, the Islanders, haven't progressed enough. That's my only statement for that. That's all I can say, is I don't think they've progressed enough to go the distance this year. I think Carolina has the better structure, the better depth to be able to go a bit further. I won't say all the way. That'll come later. I'll spoil it now. Carolina's not making it all the way. And I think it falls under the defensive comparison. That's all I'm going to say. I don't want to get too statistical with this because I'm not good at statistics. I'm just sticking with the stories. But that sums up round 1. Round 2 now. Dallas versus Winnipeg. I've got Winnipeg in 7. I think that the only way that this prediction will come through is if Hellebuck stays on his game and the defense doesn't collapse. Which seems to be the story of the Jets, is their collapse in the postseason. But the way I see it, and again, statistical stuff, not my forte, but I think that the Jets' defensive structure is a bit better than Dallas's. Dallas has the offensive. They've got that figured out. But if someone counteracts that with the defensive, but can out-offense their defense, guess who's winning? So I think Jets take it. It'll be hard fought, but Jets will take it in 7. Nashville versus LA. This is a storyline one. Nashville in 5. Reason being, I think LA will become too lax with their victory over the Oilers. I think that they'll back down a bit because their demons have been beaten, and they'll be unexpecting when the second wave hits. And that second wave being Nashville and Saros and Yossi and Forsberg. They're going to go and wipe the floor, or the ice, I suppose, with the Kings. Florida versus Boston could go either way. I went with Boston in 7. It's going to be a that whole thing that I listed with the Battle of Florida, that whole shebang is coming back again. If this happens, you bet I will be covering it. It's the rematch of last season in the first round where Boston was upset, and it's a battle of the pests. You got Matthew Tkachuk, Brad Marchand, both going head-to-head, trying to get under each other's skin. But I think, and this is where I put Boston ahead, I think in 7 games, I think Marchand has a bit more experience when it comes to being a pest. And that's going to play a huge, important part in this whole charade of pest versus pest. You've got Nick Cousins to build up the Tkachuk roster of pest, but Nick Cousins isn't really a pest so much as he is just dirty. And I can absolutely see he does something stupid in the first round against Tampa Bay. I can see Cousins being suspended in the postseason. I could see that aspect of the Panthers game being a moot point in going into the second round. Maybe even game 1 of the second round, I could see Cousins doing something stupid to the Bruins. Rangers versus Canes. Rangers in 6, because I feel like the Rangers have more skill than the Canes have. I think the Rangers roster is a bit more well-rounded than the Canes are, not to mention the Canes goaltending situation has been kind of iffy. If it's any consolation, my prediction is that the Canes aren't going to get swept in the conference final. So that's something, that's some good news, right? Round 3, Winnipeg versus Nashville. I think Winnipeg's going to take this one. The reason being, this is, other than one other time, I believe, in franchise history, this is the closest that they've come to the Stanley Cup final. They've never tasted the Stanley Cup final. Their drive is going to be there. They're going to want to get into the Stanley Cup final. And that's not to say that the Nashville Predators aren't going to want to be there, but I think that Winnipeg's drive is going to be a bit more intense. And the reason why I bring it down to story specifically in this one, I've been doing it all throughout this prediction video, but for this one, I think this is the most similar matchup. Like, the teams are basically one and the same. I think that this matchup would be a hard-fought battle of who's going to get the upper hand, because they're both very similar teams. But I'm going to take Winnipeg coming out of this one. Bruins versus Rangers. I had the Bruins coming out of this one specifically because of the pest situation. That's basically going to be their storyline going forward. You can put Matt Rempe into the fray and have him go and beat the snot out of whoever you want. But the pest in Brad Marchand will always find a way to use that against you. And I think Marchand's skill at doing that is going to come into play here, and we could say goodbye to New York. However, I say Boston in 7. I'm going to say Boston in 7, but I'm also going to hold an asterisk to that because you also kind of need the skill. I think Boston is skilled. I think New York is a bit more skilled. So it's going to be basically a battle of wits, I think, in this one. Who's going to have more patience? The patience of the guy who's trying to mess up the other team, or the patience to deal with the guy who's trying to mess up the other team? Anyway, we get to the Stanley Cup final, the one that's totally going to happen. Winnipeg, Boston. Boston's going to take it. And there's 2 reasons. One, that whole pest situation, which I'm not going to cover again for like the 3rd time. But the other reason is because it's something they had to prove. And we saw it already. It's a historic thing. The first team, or the most recent team before the Bruins last season, to beat the regulation wins record was Tampa Bay back in 2019. And if you remember, they went up against the Columbus Blue Jackets, got swept. Humiliating. Bruins do it in 2023. And they face the Florida Panthers, who are 17th overall. Calgary is 16th. They didn't make the playoffs because they weren't in the East, and I'm still kind of mad about it. But anyway, Bruins go up 3-1 in the series, and then they pull the Leafs. Florida comes back. Bruins get a lead in Game 7. Florida comes back. Tkachuk wins it. Florida moves on. Humiliating. So I think that the Bruins are going to pull a Tampa Bay Lightning, and they're going to win the Stanley Cups. So that's my predictions, and I'm kind of hoping some of them come true, because, I mean, for one, I'd feel vindicated, but for the other, it'd mean I've done well despite the lack of experience. So we'll see what happens. In the meantime, stay howling. Go Yotes! I'll be back tomorrow at the time of me recording this. I'll be back tomorrow to cover the first game of the Battle of Florida. Stay tuned.